श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवान ની જય અક્ષર પુરુષોત્તમ મહારાજ ની જય પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજ ની જય મહંત સ્વામી મહારાજ ની જય પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજ શતાબ્દી મહોત્સવની જય. We're currently studying the Pramukh Swami Maharaj Jivan Charitra Part 1, and for this session we'll be focusing on assessment K. So we're studying pages 500 to 555, which is from 1969 to 1970. Now, the notes are also available in English. You can download them from myBAPS. And we can see that they've also been sectioned in such a way that you can also listen to the Gujarati tracks if needed. So this session we're going to start off with K13. Pramukh Swami Maharaj had a very amicable personality. And when he came back to Bhadra after traveling all the other villages, all the villagers of Bhadra who had served with him during the Pratishta all flocked to meet him. Pramukh Swami Avya, Pramukh Swami Avya. Swami Shri had won over their hearts during all his interactions with them. Even Swami Shri was very, very happy to see all of them. Now, while he was there in Bhadra, he had heard about how the village was facing a severe water shortage. And as a result, the villagers were facing lots of difficulties in their daily activities. Now, the mandir had a bore well, and so Swamiji then instructed the administrators of the mandir to provide water to all the villagers from this mandir bore well. Now, this was a huge help for all the villagers. And this is something that we have seen in Swamishi's life, that wherever he went, he was always there willing to help. And that's why the Sanstha was always there to help anybody who needed it at that time. Now, from Bhadra, Swami Shri traveled all the way to Gondal, where he met Yogiji Maharaj. And from there, Swami had heard that Dulabhai Kag, his health was not too good. And he was resting in a hospital which was near Songad. So from Bhadra, Swami Shri traveled to Gondal. He met Yogiji Maharaj over there. And then they went to the hospital which was near Songad to meet Dulabhai Kag. Dulabhai Kag, just as a reminder, was a very famous Gujarati poet, and he had a lot of affection for Yogiji Maharaj. We've mentioned this in the past. Dulabhai Kag has written some very famous bhajans that we all often sing and listen to. Dhoa diyo ne Raghunath, tamara pag dhoa diyo ne Raghunath. Bijo avine kok bole bawaji deto ne deto jogiro. Jogi joya joanu kai na rayu re. Jogida ne joa gaya ta. Jonara Jhadpana. All these bhajans have been written by Dulabhai Kag. So naturally, Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj, they went to see him. And he was also very, very happy to see Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Yogiji Maharaj, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Mahant Swami Maharaj, they were all there. And they all offered prayers for his well-being. Now both Swami Shri and Mahant Swami Maharaj, as instructed by Yogiji Maharaj, both then spoke to Dulabhai Kag. And they offered lots of comfort to Kag Bapu. They spent almost 2 hours at the hospital, and then they left for Bhavnagar. And then from Bhavnagar, Pramukh Swami Maharaj then went, from Bhavnagar, Swami Shri then visited G3, and he made his way to Ahmedabad. We now move on to K14. Pramukh Swami Maharaj had travelled to Ahmedabad, and while he was in Ahmedabad, Swami Shri had been requested by the Bal Mandir to come and speak in the Bal Sabha. And then he was requested by the Yuvak Mandir to come and speak in the Yuvak Sabha. And then eventually he ended up speaking also in the Sunday Satsang Sabha. So 3 Sabhas in one day, but all 3 with different age backgrounds. Now Swami Shri had an incredible ability to connect with people of all different generations. And so it was natural that he was invited to all these Sabhas. And I think anyone who may have met Pramukh Swami Maharaj will remember his ability to connect with people of all different generations and different types of backgrounds. You know, if it was children, they were never subdued by his veteran personality. Neither were the elderly people. They would never take him very lightly because of his childlike pleasantness. The youth never found him out of date or orthodox. So we could see that Swami Shri was able to cater to all 3 different types of generations. Let's move on to K15. Now this section narrates a very interesting incident while Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Ahmedabad. Many Hari Bhaktos still remember how during a katha in Ahmedabad, Swami Shri had narrated the incident of the time when it rained very heavily in Sarangpur during the time of Bhagwan Swaminarayan, and how Bhagwan Swaminarayan had begged for alms in the village, had fed the Paramahanses and saved the cattle from supporting a falling shed with his own hands. Now hearing Swami Shri's katha, the devotees from the audience requested Swami Shri that the rains have failed this year, and would you please request Maharaj to bring the rains. Now listening to the devotees' prayers, Swami Shri immediately resorted to his most powerful tool, and that was Dhun. And this is something we've seen throughout Swami Shri's life. Whenever it was time to pray, the first thing that Swami did was he would start doing Dhun. And so Swami then said to everybody, okay, let's pray to Maharaj. It'll happen as he wishes. And saying this, he engrossed himself in performing Dhun for the rainfall that year. Swami Shri's prayers were always so genuine and so sincere. It was almost as though Bhagwan had no choice but to listen and to fulfill his prayers. And fortunately for everybody, all the prayers paid off, and it rained very heavily that night. Let's move on to K16. So in Ahmedabad, K.K. Dave had organized an assembly at his school so that students could receive blessings from Swami Shri. Swami Shri visited the school and blessed the teachers and the staff first, and then he came to the students' assembly, and then he addressed them as well. Now throughout Gujarat, Swami Shri was so well respected, so all the schools would naturally invite him to address the students and offer prayers. And as mentioned earlier, he possessed a very unique skill of understanding and being able to interact with the youth. He never came across as a preacher, but always as a friend, and was able to inspire so many on the righteous path. Swami Shri had developed a bond with the devotees that they did not hesitate in inviting him even to some seemingly menial occasions. And this was the amazing thing about Pramukh Swami Maharaj, that even he was even more than happy to entertain all such requests. And on one occasion, when Swami Shri was traveling from Ahmedabad to Atladra, he stopped midway to bless a rice mill and then 2 wells during this journey. You know, as we discussed earlier, no matter seemingly how simple something was, but for Pramukh Swami Maharaj, he gave it his 100%. And Swami Shri's actions remind us of what Bhagwan Swaminarayan had said in the Vachanamrit in Karyani section 1. And Shriji Maharaj states કે ભગવાન પણ સ્થૂળ ભાવને ધારણ કરીને દેહધારી જેવા થાય છે અને તે પોતાના ભક્તને લાડ લડાવે છે. And then he goes on to say કે તેને કરીને એ ભક્તને ભગવાનની જાજી મર્યાદા રહેતી નથી. પછી જેવી એ ભક્તને ઈચ્છા હોય તેવી રીતે લાડ લડાવે છે. Basically, Pramukh Swami Maharaj always, just like Shriji Maharaj, would shower his affection upon all the devotees in whichever way that they desired. And so this is something that we see in Pramukh Swami Maharaj's life. Let's move on to K17. Now Swami Shri's simplicity and modesty had earned him the affection of all the Santos and the Hari Bhaktos wherever he went. Yogiji Maharaj would also tell the sadhus in the mandirs, wherever Swami Shri, each of the mandirs that Swami went, Yogi Bapa would tell the sadhus કે પ્રમુખ સ્વામીની સેવા કરજો, રોજ નવી નવી વાનગીઓ કરીને સ્વામીને જમાડજો, તેમની વાતો સાંભળજો. Yogi Bapa would always encourage everybody to listen to his talks, to listen to Pramukh Swami Maharaj's talks. And naturally that drew all the sadhus very much close to close to Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Now despite being so tied up with so many other responsibilities, Pramukh Swami Maharaj had made it a point to spend time with all the devotees and the sadhus. It's naturally very, very difficult, you know, when you have so many things going on, and yet to take time out for the Santos and for all the Hari Bhaktos, because Swami was obviously busy with meetings, his Vichran, Padramnis, and amidst that, he had to make sure that he also gave enough time to all the Santos as well. And during that time, a corn festival had been organized at the farm in Atladra Mandir. Now, despite all the other tasks, Swami Shri made sure that he attended this event, and you know, naturally he pleased all the sadhus and all the Hari Bhaktos, and this was something that was very that came very natural to Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Move on to K18. So from Atladra, Swamiji then traveled to Surat. Now his time in Surat was packed with Padramnis. Despite the rainy conditions, Pramukh Swami Maharaj carried on with all the house visits just to make sure that he pleased all the Hari Bhaktos. And Swami naturally enjoyed these Padramnis as well. But even with such a packed Padramni schedule, he made sure that he went for darshan at the Swaminarayan Mandir of the older diocese, as well as doing darshan of Shriji Maharaj's sanctified Pag. It was a Sunday, and so Swamiji also gave labh in the Sunday Sabha. Now Swamiji stayed in Surat for a few days, then came back to Atladra, and then continued his travels to Bochasan. Now Chaturmas had just started on the auspicious day of Devupodi Ekadashi, and so Swamiji also took a niyam, and he took a niyam to observe the Dharnaparna Vrat for 1 month. Now along with the month-long fast, he also took on the niyams to perform maras, pradakshinas, as well as reading the Bhakta Chintamani and the Jivan Charitras of Bhagaji Maharaj and Shastriji Maharaj. Swamiji stayed on in Bochasan to celebrate the Guru Punam festival. And Swami wrote in his journal, Aje samayo, hajaro hari bhakto Guru Punam mate avya hata. Adbhut samayo hato. જમણમાં શીરો 25 મણનો તથા શાક 25 મણ હતું. બટાકા દૂધીનું. It's very interesting to see what Swami writes in his diary. Swami talks about today's celebration. He said today's celebration, thousands of devotees came for the Guru Punam festival. It was a great celebration. Hajaro Hari Bhakto Ayavata. So lots of Hari Bhaktos showed up. Thousands of Hari Bhaktos showed up. Again, it says what kind of a festival it was. Adbhut Samayato. For even Pramukh Swami Maharaj, he enjoyed the festival so much. And he even notes down what they offered to all the Hari Bhaktos for lunch. Around 25 mans of shiro and 25 mans of shak were prepared. And he also notes down which type of shak it was. It was Bateta Dudinu shak. So this was something, again, very interesting to note in Pramukh Swami Maharaj's diary. Let's move on to K19. So after these festivities in Bochasan, then Swamiji made his way to Ahmedabad. A very interesting incident is narrated in this chapter. Swamiji was scheduled to take the train to Rajkot from Ahmedabad, and normally Swami would travel in the third-class coach. However, only 2 spots were available for reservation. And Swamiji required 3 reserved spots, 1 for himself and 2 for the accompanying sadhus. Now 1 seat was for Swamiji and 1 for the sevak that they could reserve, which meant that they could not make arrangements for Pragat Bhagat on that particular train. Now although he did have a general ticket, he still could not travel in the reserved compartment without a reservation. And so Pragat Bhagat then told Swamiji not to worry about him, and he reassured Bapa that he'll find a way to make it to Gondal, find some other way to make sure he can get to Gondal. But obviously Swami wasn't prepared to leave him back, and so he requested Pragat Bhagat. He said, "Look, just jump onto the train, sit with me, and when the inspector arrives, we will work something out." Now it would have been just easy to let Pragat Bhagat just find his own way, but even after 25 years of acquaintance, Swamiji made sure that he didn't take Pragat Bhagat's seva for granted, and he made sure that he took care of Pragat Bhagat. So this was something very interesting. Pragat Bhagat still remembers this to this day. Now the journey began, and then when the ticket inspector approached, he came up to their seat. Swamiji explained their situation to him, what had actually happened. And so he told the ticket inspector that once we reach Rajkot, we will pay the reservation fee. And the ticket inspector luckily agreed and raised no objections at that time. Then the journey continued, and as Rajkot approached, Swamiji, quickly deboarded the train, and he went from one coach to another, looking to raise 2 rupees to cover the sevak's reservation fee. Swamiji was looking for a devotee or a known face who might be able to pay the amount. Now remember, it was only 2 rupees that Swami was looking for. Now, it's one thing to see the president of the Sanstha making big decisions for the Sanstha, receiving huge honor and accolades from thousands of Hari Bhaktos, but to see Pramukh Swami Maharaj begging from coach to coach in search of 2 rupees just to pay for his Sevak's ticket was something that left a lasting impression in Pragat Bhagat's heart. And I think that's something that says a lot about Pramukh Swami Maharaj and his humility and in how humble Swami was at that time. Finally, Swamiji then met an unknown resident of Gondal. His name was Bachu Bhai. He wasn't a satsangi. And Swami explained to him the whole issue. Bachu Bhai, very gladly paid the 2 rupees to the ticket inspector because obviously the Santos didn't have any money with them. Swamiji thanked Bachu Bhai and then asked for his address. And then once they got to Gondal, Swamiji then sent Bachu Bhai 2 rupees for the ticket along with Thakurji's prasad. Let's move on to K20 now. So in Gondal, Swamiji began a 5-day Parayan on the Harilila Kalpataru. Yogiji Maharaj was in Mumbai at this time and his health had worsened. So the doctors in Mumbai had advised Yogi Bapa to take enough rest. And so as soon as the Parayan was over, Pramukh Swami Maharaj boarded a flight to Mumbai from Rajkot to spend some time with Yogi Bapa. And Swami was there for about 2 weeks with Yogi Bapa. And then once Yogi Bapa's health stabilized, and only then Pramukh Swami Maharaj carried on with his Vicharan. But we can see that Swamishi's Guru Bhakti over here as well. That just the slightest hint of Yogi Bapa's health worsening, he was there. It reminds us of the time when Shastriji Maharaj had fallen ill while Pramukh Swami Maharaj was doing a Parayan in Nainpur. And again, Swami had to quickly rush over to meet Shastriji Maharaj. Similarly, Swami had to rush over to meet Yogi Bapa. Nevertheless, when Yogi Bapa's health stabilized, Pramukh Swami Maharaj then carried on his Vicharan, celebrating the Janmashtami festival in Atladra. Now, once these festivities were over, Swamiji then gradually made his way to Sarangpur. Now, while Bapa was in Sarangpur, the sadhus, they all came to meet Pramukh Swami Maharaj. They wanted to arrange a meeting with Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And they came with Puja Sant Vallabh Swami. The reason for coming was because they had a proposal. And the proposal was to paint the entire Sarangpur Mandir. Now, painting the Mandir at that time did not seem financially feasible. But they still proposed the idea to Swami Shri with the hope to get some sort of support from Bapa. Now, Swami Shri actually approved this proposal. But this would only mean much more hard work for Pramukh Swami Maharaj, because it was Swami Shri who would have to raise the funds for the Mandir's paint work. And he wanted to please the sadhus, who were ready to paint the Mandir as well at that time. And so he took it upon himself to make sure that all the arrangements were taken care of, just so that he could fulfill their wish. Eventually, Swami Shri then inspired Narayan Bhai Patel, Shamji Bhai, and some others to financially contribute to the project so that they could all get started on the project. Once again, Swami Shri's support here left an everlasting impression on the sadhus. So we will end today's session with a video. The video is a short video of about 9 minutes. In the previous session, we had talked about the Bhadra Murti Pratishta, where Yogiji Maharaj had done the Pratishta of the Mandir in Bhadra, and also talked about all the efforts that Pramukh Swami Maharaj had put in during the festivities and during the Pratishta Utsav. So this video will have some Ashirad and blessings about Pramukh Swami Maharaj, where in his own words, him narrating the incident in Bhadra, and a short Smruti video of how events unfolded when Yogiji Maharaj did the Pratishta. Shri Swaminarayan Bhagwanani Jai.
સન 1969ના એપ્રિલ મહિનામાં ઉજવાયેલ ભાદરા મંદિરનો મૂર્તિ પ્રતિષ્ઠા મહોત્સવ સ્વામી શ્રીની વ્યાવહારિક કુનેહનો સાક્ષી બની રહેલો. એ સમયની ભીડા ભક્તિભરી સેવા સ્વામી શ્રી માટે સ્મરણીય બની રહેલી. આવો તેને માણીએ તેઓના જ શ્રીમુખે.
હું તો આટલા પ્રતિષ્ઠાનો દિવસ હતો ને પ્રતિષ્ઠા કરવાના ત્યારે માણસો ખૂબ આવવાના, એટલે પાણીનો બહુ પ્રશ્ન હતો અને વરસાદ પણ બહુ ઓછો થયેલો તે વખતે, એટલે પાણી મળે નહીં. બધા જ કૂવાઓ જ્યાં ગામના હતા, નદીની અંદર કૂવા પાણી હતા, એ બધા જ પાણી ખલાસ થઈ ગયું. ક્યાંય પાણી મળે નહીં. અને પ્રતિષ્ઠાનો દિવસ નજીક, એટલે સ્વામીજીને થયું કે આપણે આ પાણીનું શું થશે. પછી એમને કહ્યું કે આપ કંઈક એવી દયા કરો કે જેથી કરીને પાણીનો પ્રશ્ન ઉકલી જાય. તો એક નદીને સામે કિનારે એક કૂવો હતો કે જેની અંદર બહુ થોડું પાણી હતું, કે પણ આપણે જો કરીએ તો એક દિવસમાં 2 દિવસમાં ખલાસ થઈ જાય. એટલે બધાએ સ્વામીને પ્રાર્થના કરી કે આપ દયા કરો તો આમાંથી આપણું કામ થઈ જાય. સ્વામીએ ધૂન કરી, ઠાકોરના પુષ્પ અંદર પધરાયા કહો અને જાઓ કે આ સમયો થશે ત્યાં સુધી પાણી ખૂટશે નહીં, હજારો માણસો પાણી પીશે, વાપરાશે તો વાંધો નહીં આવે, એવા આશીર્વાદ આપ્યા. પણ એ પાણી ત્યાંથી આપણે મંદિર સુધી લાવવાનું. નદી પણ લગભગ 100-150 ફૂટ પહોળી અને રેત એટલે ખોદવાનું હતું. કંટાળથી જેને કંટાળ આપ્યો થાકી ગયો, મૂકી ગયો, રેતથી પથરી જાય અને પાછું પૂરાઈ જાય, ખોદે એટલું પૂરાઈ જાય. પછી સ્વામીએ કહ્યું કે આવશું, એટલે પછી ગામના માણસોને સ્વામી બોલાયા. જવાન બધા છોકરાઓ આવી ગયા અને બધાને આજ્ઞા કરી કે પ્રમુખ સ્વામીની સાથે જાઓ અને આપણે બધું આ કામ છે એ કરો. એટલે પછી અમે એ કામ લીધું. એટલે અમે સાધુ 5-4 હતા અને હરિભક્તો બધા 5-50. એટલે દરરોજ સવારે બપોરે ખોદીએ, સવારથી સાંજે ખોદીએ અને પછી રાતના પાછું ચાલે 12 વાગ્યા સુધી. પાટિયા રેતી છે એટલે પાટિયા મૂકી દઈએ એટલે રેતી ધસરાય નહીં. અને એમ કરીને નદીની અંદર 6 થી 8 ફૂટ જેટલા પાઇપ નીચે નાખ્યા અને ત્યાંથી પાણી લઈ અને જે કામ આપણે મહિના સુધી કરીએ તો ના થાય, પણ 3-4 દિવસમાં નદીની પાર આવી ગયા અને ઠેઠ મંદિર સુધી પહોંચી ગયા. એટલે એ વાત જાણીને પછી સ્વામી પાસે ગયા. એટલે સ્વામી ખૂબ રાજી થયા કે તમે બહુ જ મોટું કામ કર્યું, મહારાજ ખૂબ રાજી થઈ જશે અને હજારો માણસો આવશે અને આ સમયો સારી રીતે થઈ છે. એ બધું જે પુણ્ય છે એ તમને એના બધા છોકરાઓએ જે મહેનત કરી છે બધાને મળશે, એમ કરીને મોટે હાથ મૂક્યા અને રાજીપો બતાવ્યો.
આમ યોગીજી મહારાજની અપાર પ્રસન્નતા મેળવીને સ્વામીશ્રીએ ભાદરાનો પ્રતિષ્ઠા મહોત્સવ શોભાડેલો. ચાલો નિહાળીએ એ ઉત્સવની કેટલીક યાદગાર સ્મૃતિઓ.
જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં, હારે મારા હૈયામાં હરખન માય રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં. પુણ્ય પુરાવી રહ્યા પણા, રીજ્યા શ્રી ભગવંત, પ્રગટ ધર્મ પ્રવર્તાવવા, પ્રગટ્યા એકાંતિક સંત. હારે વીરા જઈએ તેવા ગુરુ પાસ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
હારે શિર સાટે લેશું અક્ષરધામ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
કે હારે શિર સાટે રાખી વિશ્વાસ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
અનેક જન્મના પુણ્યથી મળ્યો મનુષ્ય અવતાર, સર્વે પ્રકારે સમજીને કરીએ ઊંડો વિચાર. એ હારે હવે ના જોવી કોઈની વાટ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં. કે હારે ભલે આવે જો વસમાં ઘાટ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
હે હાલો જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
ઘણી ઉપાધિ સહન કરી, બહુ બહુ વેઠ્યા દુઃખ, તો પણ મોહબ્બત રાખતા કદી ન આવ્યું સુખ. કે હારે વિરામું કોને સર્વેનો સાથ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં. કે હારે વીરા શિર સાટે ભીડો હવે બાથ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
હે જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
ઘરમાં ઘૂસી જે રહે, નીકળે નહીં જે બહાર. ભાગ ન લે સાચા સંગમાં, તે નરને ધિક્કાર. હારે વીરા શીખવા ગુણાતીત જ્ઞાન રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં. કે હારે વીરા રહીએ સદા ગુલતાન રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
હે હાલો જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
સ્વામી શ્રીજી અખંડ રહે, અંતરમાં કરીવાસ. એવા સાચા સંતનો રાખી પૂરણ વિશ્વાસ. કે હારે વીરા કરી લો ને આપણું કામ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં. કે હારે વીરા તુરત મળે હરિધામ રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
હે જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
દેશો દેશમાં વિચરીને કરવું અલૌકિક કાજ. સાચા સંતને સેવવા, મેલીને લોકલાજ. કે હારે વીરા અવસર સારો આવ્યો, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં. કહે શંકર આવો જોગ મનમાં ભાવ્યો,
જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
કે હારે વીરા અણમોલો અવસર જાય રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
હે જઈએ સ્વામીજીના સંગમાં.
હારે મારા હૈયામાં હરખન માય રે, જઈએ સ્વામીજી